and we are way behind them. I don't know how they did it, but it's a longer story. Maybe one day on the side I'll tell Gary, and then Gary can put it on one of his blog or whatever, one of his news. Back to you.
Thank you, Ellen. Abby, followed by Brian.
Hi, Gary. So I think there's a number of things going on. First of all, if you look at this, in the way Trump deals with crisis or he deals with negotiation, I would take the position that this is a tactic, and he's still really negotiating this deal. He's putting hard strength, a whole different level of pressure by saying he's going to bomb the shit out of them or whatever his comments are. But I think he's still in the art of the deal. I do think that this has turned with it being personalized towards Trump, and I don't think we saw that as much before. I mean, if you look at the videos of the protests, the signage is "Kill Trump, Death to Trump," and it's now focused on hurting him. The information, the intelligence out of Israel, I mean, it's not new that now how many assassination attempts have we seen towards the president from Iran, but now you see the populace looking at targeting him. There's a total, I mean, it's shifted now where with him, this may get more personal than it had been before. I just think that we're going to see a lot more, we're going to see more weaponry. We probably will go in harder. You'll see the scramble of Pakistan and Qatar and everyone and Turkey trying to get us back to the table. And in a sense, we may still be at the table, but this is just one of our negotiating tactics, is to come hard at them. That's kind of what I think is going on. But I definitely see this becoming more personalized from the IRGC public towards him than we saw before. That was it.
Thank you, Abby. Well, they try opponents of any country or any organization. It's an excellent tactic to personalize it and make it about one individual. And we know that Donald Trump's a very controversial figure, and we know that in our society, where we are not just permitted but actually encouraged to publicly criticize our leaders, that he's like a lightning rod, and much the same way as Israel's being personified as Bibi Netanyahu, not as Israel, by Israel's detractors. And so it's a tremendous tactic. It's obviously going way beyond political rhetoric when you're trying to assassinate the President of the United States. That's for certain. I would agree that, as I said earlier, a lot of this is tactical. He's wielding both the carrot and the stick. The question is whether these folks in power in Tehran or wherever they're hiding out these days give a damn about that. And there's no political war of attrition there. There's a political war of attrition in the West. So I guess we'll see which way it goes. Thank you, Abby. We'll go to Brian, followed by Anson.
Hey, Gary. Iran and the United States was never on the same page. Trump would put out a statement, they would put out an opposite statement, or no, that's not the way it was. I know somebody had yesterday a signed MOU, but from everybody, so you would think that they would stick to the agreement. We did the honorable thing and took the blockade away. We took off the sanctions. We upheld our end of that agreement that we were willing to go to. They never open that strait. They never, there were some few ships that went through, but they never really allowed that strait to be open. So we kind of stepped in this in the very beginning, and you know, Trump gave it a try, but time for the MOU and the peace talk is over. So we really don't have any choice but to go to war either until we see a regime change, or at least until that regime agrees that they're going to stick to an actual memo of understanding and stick to the rules. What I think they were playing games and stalling as long as they could for whatever reason. Maybe they were rebuilding or getting their stuff into place or whatever. But I think they were stalling and playing games and never intended to do peace. And it shows. Why would they? Why did they bomb that cargo ship? Why would they say that the ships couldn't go through Oman if they were wanting peace? I think, the United States did their part. I mean, Trump immediately took the blockade away. I mean, and I personally think he should have waited on that, but, it's his call. But at least he did do our end of the bargain. They never held up their end of the bargain. As far as I can see, they never really agreed fully to that memo of understanding, and we're not really going to have a choice. And maybe, hopefully Trump can get, at least a majority of the people behind him, and knowing that, look, we tried and it didn't work, so we're going to have to try something different. And that's where I am with it. Thanks.
So, Brian, as I mentioned yesterday, history shows this should be no surprise to anyone. Iran and its proxies, and we use the term proxies, but let's just be clear that these terrorist groups that have been attacking Israel, including on October the 7th, are doing so at the direction of Iran. The command and control is from Iran. The financing of it is from Iran. And you can see every time some kind of a peace or a settlement or a negotiation or however you want to call it is struck between Israel and these terrorist groups, the terrorist groups do not adhere to what they agreed to adhere to. And so it should come as no surprise to anyone that Iran didn't live up to the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding. They couldn't even hold themselves back for the short period of time that was prescribed in the MOU in order to negotiate a real end of the hostilities. They couldn't even wait that short period of time. They just don't have it in them. They are not the same as the West. Their perspective is completely different. You know the story about the scorpion and the turtle or the tortoise, where take me across the river, I'm back, but we're mortal enemies. You'll sting me, but if I sting you, we'll both drown. So there's no way. And then he stings him. He says, "Why did you do that? Now we'll both drown." He says, "I don't know. It's just in my nature." That's what we're dealing with here, Brian.
Well, one other quick thing I was going to say, too. I read a story this morning that there was also some strikes on Iran that were not claimed by the United States. And I was wondering if you knew what other Gulf states...
I do not know who was responsible for that. And as I was told yesterday, if a source told me who was responsible for that, I'm just saying what somebody told me. I don't know what I'm talking about. So maybe I should just keep my mouth shut when I get information. But I'm being facetious. I'm
just wondering, though, why don't they, if they're willing to shoot it while we're shooting and kind of be, like, oh, we didn't do that. Why do you think any of those Gulf states over there are willing to side with us if this goes to war?
They have their own domestic issues. They have people, each one of them, who want to overthrow their regimes. They have to be extremely cautious about how they do this. When some of these Gulf states showed support No, they didn't fly jets or fire missiles, but they showed strategic military support for the United States and Israel last year. This was not something that was made public because of their internal problems. They have to negotiate these waters as carefully as the ships negotiate the Strait of Hormuz to avoid the minefields. It's not dissimilar at all. So I don't particularly see a pan-Arab rising against Iran. Would I like to see that? Absolutely. I think I don't know how any nation sits back and takes incoming from a neighboring nation without responding. Um, I know Israel gets criticized for doing so, but can you imagine if the United States took incoming from another nation, that we would just sit back and say, all we are saying is give peace a chance. That's not the time to sing that song, which I actually love. This is a time when you use your military might and you call on your friends to help you. You can't allow for this kind of bullshit. So I'm with you, Brian. I wish they would, but I don't see it in the foreseeable future. And by the way, as you all know, I accept the fact that I can be wrong. And in this case, I hope I am. Anson, followed by, my eyes are bothering me here, and the name is Estefan. Estefan. Anson.
The biggest constraint against Iran was what they would look and see a united America intent on continuing military action and strong, brutal economic action until the nature of the regime radically changes, which would mean a regime change. That would be, I mean, why is Iran doing what it's doing? But they see the midterm elections coming up, and every time they turn on their TVs in Iran, if they could, and watch the American news, they would see that if the Democratic Party reflects the expressed will by polls of the American people, 55, maybe 60%, that all military operations whatsoever, any and all, against Iran would stop immediately. And they see the Gulf denuded of the American Navy as soon as the Democratic Party gains political power in the United States. They know Trump is detested by probably over half of the American people. And they see that he is going to become a lame duck president for the next 2 years, 2.5 years. He can blather all he wants, and they can just ignore him and wait for the right political upheaval in the United States, such that if you flew a satellite over the over the Iran and the Persian Gulf, you would not see any aircraft carriers, you would not see any American warships, you would see the bases denuded all around the Middle East, an isolationist America withdrawing to its own borders, and all for the sake of ensuring that we keep gas prices cheap. They don't think the West, in particular the United States, has the intestinal fortitude to stand firm until the Iranian government chooses to join the peaceful nations of the West. And that would be the biggest constraint that if God forbid, pick whoever you choose to be a true leader of the Democratic Party in the United States would stand tall and say, we will develop the specific, the specific requirements to achieve a ceasefire and a negotiated peace with Iran. And it would be well debated and supported by 80% of the people when it was finally debated and put in place. And then the willingness of the American people to do whatever it takes in order to achieve those goals. We didn't do that. We haven't done that. That's the starting this war without that in place was one of the dumbest acts that America has done at least since 9/11. And until they see a united states, a united America willing to put on the military pressure, and I don't mean boots on the ground, but reestablishing an ironclad naval blockade. No Iranian ship moves in or out of the Gulf, period. Any Iranian ship inside the Persian Gulf will be sunk. How about that? Anything Iranian that has a dollar sign attached to it will be immediately confiscated by the united financial control of the West. That's what it's going to take in order to make Iran join the nations of peace. The West does not have the gumption to be able to hold them accountable and keep up the appropriate economic and military pressure until they do so. Thank you.
And Anson, I'd like to add to that, and I'd like you to try this out for size, and that is, why is there this big political drumbeat against the United States engagement in areas where you and I may feel that the United States, that it is, that there are existential threats to the United States from these regions, but we're being told over and over and over again.
Go to JohnKitoverNews.com.
Nothing to do with us, and it's
we are
no
listening
secret.
to a live broadcast podcast about Donald Trump and the Iran war. Like this video, subscribe, and share.
Funding the political conflict in the United States, that they use a highly sophisticated method. They don't bribe officials like in the old Soviet Union days and the old Red China days, but we know that there's this state-sponsored information warfare, there's digital manipulation, there are organizations that are funded. If you follow the money, there are organizations that are funded, that are out there screaming and hollering about the policy of the United States, and as American citizens, they surely have the right to do so, but they are, let's not lose sight of the fact that they are funded by Russia and China, and when we know that they are funded by Russia and China, then we can assess perhaps their motivation, or maybe not the motivations of the individuals, but we can assess Russia and China's motivation for infiltrating or funding or establishing such organizations here in the United States. So what we see may not be organic in nature in terms of the populist view towards these situations.
I think that the Great Divide, which you're talking about, I believe the Great Divide is 99% a great divide of the American people, American citizens, red-blooded Americans, if you will. Some of it, sure, on the fringes is going to be developed by people that want to want to weaken the United States and make it lose its superpower status, et cetera, et cetera. which that's the motivation of Russia and China, and that's the motivation of Iran. Death to America, they say it out loud all the time. But I believe the divide is true and real within the United States, and it's so destructive that we are unable to do the things that America used to do, to stand up firmly and resist using overwhelming military power and achieve the reasonable goals of
To
the
a
American
live broadcast podcast about Donald Trump and the Iran war.
in Congress.
Like this video,
And then
subscribe,
the will of
and
the people, their
share.
Congress would stand up and unite the country through Congress rather than a lame duck, orange-haired man that increasingly is losing the respect of the vast majority of the American people. And until we can do that as a nation, in other words, until that great divide goes away, Gary, our opponents are going to do everything that they can to continue to perpetuate it and make it even deeper and wider.
Well, you know, I am fond of quoting somebody that you are old enough to remember as well, but most people here probably are not. The cartoon strip character, when we used to have cartoon strips in newspapers, when we used to have newspapers, Pogo was fond of saying, I have met the enemy and he is us. And that's exactly what you're saying.
Exactly. This is us. It is not you being influenced by Russia or China that I just. It's not Russia or China. Maybe Scott, for example. Scott and I have a hard time agreeing on many things. But I don't think it's Russia or China influencing Scott, and I don't think he believes that some right-wing nuts somewhere around the world are influencing me. We're going to have our great divide. Now, I'm not trying to pick on Scott, but Scott and I we don't even have a great divide. There's just a difference of opinion that Scott and I have, where most of the time Marshall and I would tend to agree with each other. But that's the natural ebb and flow of politics in the United States without any foreign or other untoward influence.
Thank you, Anson. We'll go now to
Listening to a live broadcast of the news regarding the Iran war with Donald Trump. Go to ChicagoNewsIncorporated.com.
I'm talking to you from Tehran. I'm so happy there are people like you, and especially Alan, who understand we people who took hostage by this Islamic fundamentalist government who killed us months ago, and during this war they had some people in the street with gun. They threatened us to avoid from a revolution. They are afraid from a revolution to take place. They spend our resources for the terrorist groups. We so pleased Mr. Trump, who killed Khamenei, and he did his best, and we become so happy if there would be a boots on the ground and regime change. But I know Mr. Trump is responsible for his country's benefits, and it cost so much for him and his country. But these efforts they do for their own benefits maybe has some benefits for the people of Iran, and I don't know what would happen after this, but remaining of these terrorist groups in Iran would cause lack of sources, lack of water, lack of everything in my country. They waste everything for terrorist groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. And it's rare that we get to hear from somebody in Iran. And I know you're literally putting your life at risk by doing this. So we appreciate your contribution. And if you feel comfortable and safe, please join us again in the future. William, followed by Daryl.
So, Iran is not like us. You started by making asking a good question. You know, how do they see the world? How are they seeing the world? And you again reiterated talking to somebody else. They are not the same as the West, and that's really important to understand. They have allies, and the allies that they have are not the same as one another either. Russia and Iran, China and North Korea. They are allies of sorts, but they're not the same as what we think of as Western allies because they're not like us. They have peculiarities. What do they have in common? They're all basically authoritarian regimes. But culturally, they've got a lot that's different from each other, and you know, only Iran is really a theocratic regime, at least formally, and acknowledging themselves as being a theocratic regime. You know, you can argue that all of them are, but they're not really the same. So we started this war. We went into the war without consulting with our own allies, and our structure of alliances was the greatest strength that the United States had for 75, 80 years until recently. And so in the first part of the Trump administration, there was a general destruction of the alliance structure. There was a lashing out based on this Donroe doctrine. We're going to withdraw, we're going to become isolationists, we're going to withdraw to the boundaries of the United States, and we're going to tariff everybody so that they should all follow us, so that not only did we alienate the allies on some ideological grounds, but we actually economically attacked them. We threatened to attack Greenland. We threatened to, we basically discounted the sovereignty of Canada, our neighbor, of Mexico. We basically treated people that would be natural allies like enemies. So we went into this war without an alliance, without going to Congress, without a strategic plan, without an endpoint, without an exit strategy, and without, fundamentally, as Anson said, that Trump should have gone to Congress. The Republicans are in power. They have the House, the Senate, 2/3 of the Supreme Court, and state governments pretty evenly split across the country.
We don't have the Senate. The thing that nobody in your shoes ever says is that it takes 7 Democratic votes to pass any legislation. You have to have 7 I'm doing is I'm destroying the filibuster at any time.
Okay, I can't hear you because you're breaking up, but what I'm saying is that regardless of those fine points of democratic governance, we went in without doing the basics of having a strategy, a plan, an exit strategy, an endpoint, and even consulting, getting some sort of authorization for use of military force, which would have entailed going in front of the American people and garnering support of the representatives and the American people. We failed to do that. So we went to war. We went to war with basically a Secretary of Defense who titled himself as Secretary of War, who's basically picked because he looked good on Fox TV was a good theatrical player.
Okay, but what does this have to do specifically with the
Because
question?
we went in and lost. And when we went in and lost, we don't acknowledge it. And now we're scrambling around for what do we do now? And they are not the same as the West.
Let's suss this out just a little bit. You say Trump went in and lost. Did he not secure a memorandum of understanding leading to a ceasefire?
That was not a victory. That was, and we can argue this later, but I believe that was basically articles of surrender.
Well,
articles of surrender are articles of surrender.
I'm not talking
That
about
was a memorandum of understanding,
historical definition of it. I'm
No,
talking
there
about
is a
for practical purposes.
there is a
We
distinct
lost.
difference.
We
No,
lost.
there is a
The Palace
distinct.
of
There is a
Palace of Versailles of all places
difference.
to sign it.
okay, so there's
Oh
a
my gosh,
difference there.
there is a distinct difference. There's a distinct difference between signing something that is a losing thing and signing a memorandum of understanding. Simply because you don't like Trump doesn't mean you have to portray every little thing as a loss, William.
Well, I agree with Gary that we need to see the world through their eyes. And I don't think we saw the world through their eyes.
Okay, so I want to go back to the question that I was trying to ask you there, William, and that is, so you see it as a surrender, but did not the memorandum of understanding, the agreement was that they would open up the Strait of Hormuz?
I think the memorandum. I think it was. They never opened up the Strait of Hormuz.
I didn't ask that. The question I have specifically is, wasn't there an agreement on the part of Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz? Maybe about it. There are 14 points and they're pretty unambiguous. If you read the memorandum of understanding, they agreed to open up the Strait of Hormuz. They agreed to not impede the flow of, the transit of commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not arguing whether they affected the agreement. I'm saying the agreement was reached. So if you take it on its face value, setting aside your agreement that we need to do a better job of understanding their mindset, and I think we're both in agreement it was almost predictable this would work the way they are working right now. Wouldn't that have been something that the president achieved? He was able to, because that's his main goal right now because of the domestic pressures, I believe, with regard to the price of gasoline at the pump. So wouldn't that be considered a victory if in fact the Iranians had upheld their end of the deal?
Well, I agree with you that they're not like us, and they were never going to uphold their end of the deal, and that they don't think like us.
Right, but I said setting that aside, isn't that a victory?
I don't think it was a victory because I don't think that. I think that we achieved a false victory.
You're an attorney. I presume you've negotiated contracts, real estate contracts, employment contracts, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so then when you negotiate a contract on behalf of your client, you give something up and you gain something in return, and sometimes it's not an actual quid pro quo. Sometimes one party benefits better than the other party, but is that a surrender?
So I've had negotiated contracts, and people will enter into contracts, and I've also been in cases where people breach contracts, as is basically the thesis that you have now, and I agree they breached the contract, but I believe the underlying problem is that we never really had an agreement, and that the victory claimed was a false victory because although the points were agreed to, but yes, and they're dirty contract breakers, and they didn't keep their word, and they
And that
didn't live up
means
to the
they're
agreement.
fault
And
and not
And
us.
there wasn't an agreement,
That-
William.
yes, but people breach. Trump breaches agreements all the time.
But that's
Okay,
not what.
we're not
but
talking
that's
about
not what
Trump.
Yeah,
we're
we
talking
were
discussing.
not talking
them.
about Trump before because you said. I
talking
just want to
about
say
them.
that
They
that
breached
they're
the
the only.
agreement,
When you
not
want to see the
us.
world through their eyes, they're not the only
William.
ones who come to the table who are dishonest or disingenuous.
And that
Did they
hasn't
breach the
happened in
agreement? Yes.
any of the contracts.
Did we ever actually have a meeting of the minds, a contract that would be enforceable?
Wait a minute.
Is there
Wait a
an
minute.
enforcement
Have you
mechanism?
never had a
No.
meeting of them?
They didn't have a meeting of the minds. The whole memorandum of understanding was BS. I don't believe it was a genuine agreement that they agreed to. I think they
Well,
breached it.
so by your reasoning, any divorce decree is BS because
No.
a divorce decree only is as good as the willingness of the parties to abide by it.
Well, no. A divorce decree is between the people who are married, so that's a little bit different. But
But there are
but
conditions.
it's sort of like
there are
having a
conditions-
contract.
There are conditions of divorce decrees, and you and I both know, and you don't have to be an attorney to know this, because
Take it out of divorce and just stick to the real estate. Do people break real estate contracts? Sure, people break real estate contracts. Okay,
so there was no agreement. There was no agreement there.
I think the memorandum of understanding
to use your analogy, if I renege on my agreement to pay my mortgage payment,
then you got to
there
go
was
to
no-
court.
right, and in this case, the court was the president dropping bombs on 90 sites 2 nights in a row. That doesn't mean there was a surrender.
All right, let's forget about surrender. But was there an agreement? Because apparently
There
it
was
wasn't.
an agreement. We signed
All
it
right.
with Pakistan, and
So they're
Pakistan
dirty
broke the deal.
contract breakers. Now the
William,
agreement's
what's
broken.
an agreement?
What are you
Is it a
gonna
meeting
do
of the
about it?
minds? Was there an offer? Was there an acceptance? Was there?
Was
Go
there-
through it. Yes, there was an agreement.
Yeah, okay, you're right, Abby, there's an agreement, but one side was insincere about the agreement.
Well, okay,
And
we know
they
that.
didn't.
You're
They
saying there
had
was.
the
Wait,
minds.
whoa. Let me
And now
just.
that we all
saying-
agreed that they
William,
broke
hold on
there
a
was an
second.
anticipatory.
We all agreed that
Are
they've
you
broken the
saying
agreement.
there was an
Now that we all agree that
anticipatory
they broke the
repudiation,
agreement.
William?
We all agreed that they've broken the agreement.
William, hold
There's
on.
an
Abby
agreement
asked
and they
you a
broke it.
question.
William,
Hold
are
on,
you
Abby
saying
asked
there
you a
was
question.
an anticipatory repudiation in this agreement?
No, I'm saying
Okay,
that the agreement at its inception was just a dodge to cut.
William, was that you? 'Cause I didn't mute you.
I didn't.
Trump was not sincere about achieving victory in the first place in the way he
That's
said
not
this.
the point.
And let me finish the
No,
sentence.
no,
He was
no,
saying-
no,
he
no.
was-
That
he
is
had an
not the
agreement.
point.
He had
That
an
is
agreement
not the
to
point,
cut and
William.
run.
Was there an anticipatory renege on the agreement or not? Because you're blaming Trump for something that the Iranians did themselves. And I don't understand why. It's not that
I'll
difficult to
tell
figure
you
out.
why.
I
Because
don't
they
have to be
didn't-
a lawyer to figure out they
They
broke
did
the
because
damn
they-
agreement.
Because they don't think enough about us and the agreement
So
to
that we shouldn't have
actually
gone into
believe.
the agreement.
It wasn't
So
We
don't
should
go
never
into
go
agreement with
into
them.
it, William,
You can
but
work-
we
you
did,
can work-
so it's
You can
there.
work reasonably, you can work backwards. Did they have an agreement? It was an agreement that they were
Oh
willing
my
to
God.
break.
Dude, your hatred of Trump is clouding you from being honest. You are not being honest. You're being dishonest.
Yes, they have
Okay,
an
we're gonna-
agreement.
we're gonna
They have an
we're gonna
agreement
move on.
that
We're-
both
we're-
sides
we're
were not going to follow.
Okay, we're going to move on because you're obfuscating the issue that we're discussing. But I just want to point out. Let me give you a real life example of a person who took a position at a relatively small company,
legal documents.
and he was
testimony.
he was pledged to him in writing by the president of the company, who hired him, the president of the company,
that upon severance, he would receive certain stock options to the company. And the severance ultimately came. But by that time, this guy wasn't president. A new guy was president. So he says, I want to claim my stock options. This guy said, I don't know anything about this. Well, the contract predates your arrival here. You're going to have to talk to the CEO. It's a small company, so he was able to walk into the CEO's office. He walks into the CEO's office, and he says to the CEO, I have it right here in writing that I would get stock options upon severance. The CEO says, well, that was, I'll call him by his first name only, that was negotiated by Joel, and Joel hasn't been here for a number of years. But it's a binding contract. And he said, sue me. Well, the cost of suing him was more than the amount of money he potentially would gain from the stock options, so he left with his tail between his legs. It happens. It doesn't mean there wasn't an agreement, but there was no desire or anticipation by this company to live up to the agreements. No matter what the law says, no matter what recourse the law says that you have. At least in this case, there is some compensation. It may not be a compensation that we want to stomach or that we support, but you saw it. There was, unlike my friend who never got his compensation, the United States got some compensation because they bombed the hell out of some military assets in Iran. And by the way, there is some reporting today that the Iranians recognize that they fucked up when they attacked those ships. They would never say it publicly, but you can read the reporting. And you can agree that it's reporting is accurate, or you may agree that it's inaccurate, because I guess reporters, I was told yesterday, shouldn't be believed if they don't reveal their sources. And that's fine, by the way. It's up to you on whether you accept the veracity or not. Right, Daryl? Daryl followed by David.
Yeah, so off top, I would like to briefly, if I can, some latitude, I would like to kind of defend William. I've actually signed 7 MOUs in my career, and what I've come to learn is that generally MOUs are not necessarily legally binding, right? The MOU is, you know, me and you, Gary, we're going to come to an understanding, and if you do this and I do that and you do this, we will at some point enter into a longer form agreement that has like more teeth to it.
Yeah, but wait a minute, wait a minute a second, Daryl.
Yeah.
What memo, what agreement between two nations is really legally binding? Huh? How many?
Well, treaties are usually legally binding.
How many countries are our country as well have been accused of violating international law? Okay, who's going to enforce that international law? Who enforces it? It's only based on whether the parties involved are willing to live up to the obligations that they announced at the time that they signed the memo of understanding.
Well, yeah, it's a good faith, right? It's the idea of good faith.
That's all it is.
Daryl, MOUs can be binding. There's certain elements that can make an MOU legally enforceable. And,
yeah, but that's why I said, Abby, I said generally.
And there are certain clauses.
Generally, not legally binding.
But
yes.
There are certain clauses in MOUs that are absolutely binding. You know, where you have confidentiality clauses and such, they are binding. And if you have a clear intention of the parties, and it essentially covers contractual elements, you can have it legally enforceable. So I just want to tell you, it's not a truthful statement to say that they are not enforceable.
See, but that's not what I said. I said they are generally, I use very specific words, I said they are generally not legally binding. I didn't say they are never legally binding.
They can be legally enforceable.
Okay, well, generally
It varies
is
from
the
state
kind of like
to state as well.
generally is like the operative word that I'm going with, right? I'm only talking about what William was saying. And
is something is a figure that I write down on a at a napkin in a restaurant.
I don't know why we're arguing about this. I really don't. I
Well,
don't
you brought it
understand
up.
this. Well, yeah, because what William was saying was technically not wrong, not fundamentally, but technically what William was saying was not necessarily wrong. That was the only point I was trying to make. What part of the part of this whole MOU thing was with particularly with Iran was that it was supposed to be, at least this is how it was presented to the American people, right?
To the world. To the world.
Yes, we have a framework for a memorandum of understanding, right? And there were 14 points, I believe.
No. That's technically inaccurate. It was not a framework for a memorandum of understanding. It was a memorandum of understanding, which was a framework for a ceasefire. There's a difference.
Yes, and part of that was, I believe it was, maybe it was the 13th or the 14th, I don't remember which point it was, but wasn't part of the framework that there would be a cessation of all attacks or whatever, and
yes,
yeah, so I'm only saying technique. I didn't even come up to talk about any of this. I came up to talk about what Anson was saying. I was just saying, from a technical perspective, what William was saying was not necessarily inaccurate. What I actually came up to say, because I thought Hanson was Anson was so on point, right? Like, we haven't, it hasn't, we talked about this, Gary, like for the past 3 weeks. This was never sold the right way, right? It was never sold in a way that the average person walking down the street understood what was at stake and what the purpose was, right? It was shifting. First it was this, it's not a war, it's a skirmish, it's not a skirmish, it's a war. It's a this, it's not a that, it's not a... I don't know, it's like if you were selling stock and someone was asking you, Gary, about this stock, and you can't get a clear message to this potential buyer as to what this investment is. I guess my question would be to you, what would you do as the buyer in this particular sense? Is it just, okay, I'm just going to go with Gary because, even though Gary's not really explaining this to me the right way, but he's asking me for my money, I'm just going to give Gary my money and just let it be an act of faith, right? We can't deny that the messaging on this has been an absolute clusterfuck from the very beginning. And again, I've said this before. This country absolutely has a collective memory of us being told that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and that he was going to imminently use these things. And that's why I say history is undefeated. Time is the world's great detective.
Okay, but wait a minute. Why do you make that analogy when in fact it's absolutely acknowledged that they have nuclear weapons program? It's absolutely acknowledged that last year 3 of their facilities were obliterated by U.S. attacks with the assistance of Israel. So why would you even use that analogy that we have this collective memory of us being lied to about Saddam Hussein, so therefore we're being lied to, or the public believes it. The public doesn't believe we were being lied to. Everybody knows that there were nuclear facilities there that were attacked by the United States. There's no denying.
You're missing the point. My point was not necessarily whether they had them or not had them. My point is confusion causes doubt. And when the message is not clear, then people can do nothing but rely on memory. I didn't say whether they had them.
That's not true. That is nonsense.
Okay, based on what?
That is absolute nonsense. People have the ability to compartmentalize things, and I really have problems with people who come to the stage and denigrate the ability of the American people to be able to comprehend what's going on. They may not be attuned to it, and the general public certainly is not as engrossed in it as we are here in the Critical Thinking Forum, but people are not going to sit around in bars saying, you know, we can't believe them about this because they lied about that. They're able to recognize that in fact there's a nuclear threat coming from Iran. Do you deny that statement?
I disagree with you about what people think because I don't tend to speak for everyone. I do know that, hold on, I do know that in my crowd.
You just did, absolutely, because you talked about the collective memory of the American people. So when you talk about collective American people, you're talking about everyone. So you open the door.
I would disagree with that.
Well, you know what? If I were the judge, I would say, Counselor, you open the door to that line of questioning. You were the one who interjected it. Now you want to pull back from it.
No, I disagree with your interpretation of collective memory. I don't think we're disagreeing. I'm kind of lost here because the only thing I'm saying is I came up to agree with Anson that this was not sold correctly and that people have a right to say, hey, am I being told the truth? And it kind of feels like what the opposite opinion is like, well, no, people should just agree to agree or just step aside. And I just somewhat, I'm not even disagreeing with you, Gary. I just disagree with the premise that this was not sold the right way.
Well, I never suggested that it was sold the right way, and I have been critical of the way it was sold and the fact that the mission changed so many times, as it has in previous iterations of military prowess by the United States. My only objection is that you used as your analogy the weapons of mass destruction allegation vis-a-vis Saddam Hussein, and then you superimpose it over this. And I object to you doing so because it's not the same thing, and you're implying while saying, well, I'm not really saying it, but you certainly are implying that that's what's happening here, and you and I both know that's not what's happening here. That is a technique of debate, but it's not a fair technique of debate.
Okay, I disagree with Anson that if you want to get the majority of people behind a cause, and if you say the mission changed, well, did the mission actually change, or did the messaging change? Because they would be distinct things. You know, the value to Iran the value of Iran to America has historically been its oil, and I don't think there's any denial of this, right? We went into we overthrew these guys in 1953 because Iran asked British Petroleum for an audit. Churchill and the CIA led a coup that overthrew this government. And like Malcolm X, I'll shut up now, but Malcolm X, when JFK was killed, he said the chickens come home to roost. And I think sometimes I agree. Sometimes the chickens come home to roost.
Is that what happened when he was killed? Did the chickens come home to roost then?
Say that again.
Malcolm X was assassinated as well. Did the chickens come home to roost then?
Yeah, you could absolutely say when he started talking, when he found out about those women having babies, yeah, the chickens came home to roost.
Interesting. Thank you, Daryl. We'll go to David, followed by Home.
Yeah, Gary, great room so far. Appreciate the dialogue here. We always want to obviously come from the position that we're pro-American, that we want to see our country succeed, particularly the level of import that this region has imposed on the world. But that doesn't appear to be what's happening. It appears that we have a triangulation of issues that aren't resolved, and Iran obviously has the upper hand with the leverage. Now you can say we can continue to bomb them into oblivion, further maybe sowing discord amongst its own people. They rally around the flag, and of course, big oil, big insurance is going to say, sorry, United States, we're going to pass on insuring these boats for now. So as long as Iran can extract that pain point in the Strait and keep those ships from passaging, Trump's in a rock and a hard place. Iran is attacking commercial shipping despite the oil deal, right? This memorandum, Gary, has not held sway. In fact, it was probably a deferred crisis on paper that only had. I read an article with this. There's a detonator attached to it, and that's essentially what has happened here. Israel continues to bomb Lebanon. Let me be clear. Bomb their enemy in Hezbollah out of state, requirements to protect itself, and the United States can't necessarily rein in Netanyahu to not do that. And so Iran's saying, well, the gloves are coming off. And now Trump is looking at facing defeat on two fronts. The crisis in the Gulf, and now the midterms, if gas prices continue to surge. And we saw what oil's done this week so far with regard to this incursion. And so either way, it looks like Trump's off-ramps are just, they're falling by the wayside. And, so Iran's continued to weaponize and leverage in a way that they didn't have before February 28. And now, show us the cards then at that point. Absent sending our troops, absent putting boots on the ground and doing a full-wage incursion, which will then light up the right. I mean, to Anson's point about the divide, there's not only a divide against the left and the right, there's a divide within the right. So Israel's looking at
facing the left right now too, isn't there? Both of the parties are facing threats from within, right?
Correct. Yeah, I've never seen it more divided in the division as extended as this. And all the hard-won gains that Israel's earned with regard to the party affiliations and going, a one policy, two nation approach to the Middle East is now being sandbagged by talk show hosts and all the talking points coming out of the right. And if our men and women go over there and die, then I mean this presidency is over, because it won't happen overnight. I mean, I think if we could do it in 6 months and take out the regime, I think the American people would go for that. But I don't think that's possible. And maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, I'm not a military guy. My heart breaks. Like I said, I have a nephew who just signed up for the Marines, so he's clearly on the front lines of potentially going over there. But make no bones about it, Gary, Iran is not afraid of whatever the hell they signed. They're not going to be beholden to something where they feel their interests aren't being served, right? And maybe they're using this latest incursion with these ships to extract an even better deal. And I don't think Trump is in a position to get a better deal than the one that he got. So that's I think that is what Iran is bargaining for here, is to get more leverage, get more of a position with regard to the rebuilding their economy, and of course controlling the ships and setting the freight.
I'm going to check you on that. If they were interested in rebuilding the economy, they would have adhered to the Memorandum of Understanding, because the Memorandum of Understanding opened up the floodgates for them to receive billions of dollars, literally. And so if it was about the economy, they would have said, okay, we'll go along with this.
But
it's not about the economy.
My question is, who threw the first punch? Did Iran throw the first punch?
Yes, the Iranians threw the first punch in this memorandum of understanding. They broke it. They attacked 2 oil ships in contravention of the memorandum of understanding. They were not supposed to do it in the first place, and they did it anyway.
Stop and think about it. If you look at it logically, which of course we cannot when it comes to Iran, look at it logically. Listen, Iran, all we're asking is that we return to the way it was before with regard to the Strait of Hormuz. We're not asking you to give up anything. We just want the Strait of Hormuz to be open like it was before all of this started. And you know what?
We'll remove the sanctions. We'll let you do international banking. We'll return your money that we are holding offshore. We'll give it to you. You can rebuild your economy. Knowing Donald Trump, maybe he'd go in there with the Trump organization and make some money rebuilding their economy with gold-plated buildings all over the damn place with the name Trump on them all. They could have had all of that. And yet, no way am we going to uphold this. We're going to attack 2 ships on the Oman side of the strait because we can do it, and we're going to hold the big evil empire, the United States. We can. Doesn't matter what memorandum of understanding we signed. We can do whatever we want, and that's what they did, David. So what would you expect the president to do at that point?
Well, then the response needs to reflect the breach of that agreement. Now,
He bombed 90 sites in one night.
Yeah, but then he's
absolutely
They did
reflected
2 nights in a row.
the agreement. 2 nights in a row. It absolutely reflected the breaking of the agreement. What did you expect? As he said, what did you expect him to do?
Well,
Can I make one
Not
comment to you,
buying it?
David, on something you
the
said?
question I have is, does this agreement mean Israel's supposed to stand down as well, and was that broken?
Israel was not part of the
We
agreement,
cannot
so why do you
mandate
bring
what
Israel
Israel
into the
does. We
They want to
cannot
make it
mandate what
case.
Israel does. We don't have the power. We don't control their political system. We don't control their military. We don't control their air force. We can't mandate that they stand down. We just can't.
And let me tell you, let me just say as an aside, Abby, if you don't mind for a moment, let me just say as an aside, that kind of conflation, I'm not saying there isn't an Israel aspect here, because Israel certainly stands to gain by the demise of this regime. Israel certainly stands to gain by the eradication of the terrorist groups that Iran funds. Israel certainly stands to gain by the elimination of the nuclear threat of Iran. Absolutely true. But to conflate everything with Israel is a very dangerous thing. Why do I say it's dangerous to do that? David doesn't have a mean bone in his body, I believe. But I will tell you, David, why it's mean. A very dangerous thing to do. Yesterday, a guy from Delaware County, Pennsylvania, was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police for walking into a state legislator's office for help with resolving a back tax issue he had, and suggesting to the people there that he was going to go and set the governor's mansion on fire again, because the first time it was set on fire by an anti-Semite who set it on fire because Shapiro somehow is responsible for the actions of a nation 5,700 miles away. Shapiro has to be taken out. So, and his family, the guy said. So he's going to go back there and set that mansion on fire again and finish the job the first one did, get rid of Josh Shapiro and his family, as if the governor of Pennsylvania, because he's a Jew, has anything to do with the policies of Israel, whether you agree with those policies or disagree. I'm going to call bullshit from now on anytime somebody says he's doing what Benjamin Netanyahu told him to do. Nobody tells Donald Trump what to do. Some people say that's really a great part of his personality. Some people say he's an egomaniac and he should park it and listen to his advisors when they tell him what he should or shouldn't do. But I think we can all agree whether we adore the man or whether we hate the man, nobody tells him what to do, much less Bibi Netanyahu. And so let's not conflate something that doesn't really exist here. Yes, we have mutual interests vis-a-vis Iran, and it's an absolute imminent threat to Israel, Iran, not so much to the United States, but we're not completely indemnified from it. But that does not mean that we are doing Bibi Netanyahu's bidding here. And, you know,
I'm not making that claim, Gary.
No, but I'm trying to explain to you, by conflating the two in the manner in which you did, you're putting Jews here in the United States in danger. Not you, I'm just saying, when people do this, they put Jews in the United States in danger. Because every one of these attacks on the Jews, the claim is they're attacking the Jews because of what's going on. What about the babies in Gaza? What does a Jewish person walking out of a synagogue in Brooklyn have to do with the babies in Gaza? Do I know whether he supports the Israeli policy or not? I don't know, and it's none of my business. And even if he does support it, what does he? Do they take a referendum of the Jewish populace in the United States before deciding what they're going to do over there? Does anybody really logically believe that? So I'm calling bullshit on the analogy and merging the two issues. There's an overlap, yes. Yes, there's an overlap of interests. But on at least 2 and maybe 3 occasions that we know of, the President of the United States picked up the phone and called the Prime Minister of Israel, the leader of a sovereign nation, and said to him, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" That's an exact quote from the President of the United States to the Prime Minister of Israel. So to suggest that that Prime Minister is telling the President of the United States what to do is absolutely absurd.
No, but I'm never saying, I never made that argument, by the way.
No, I know you didn't say that explicitly.
But the optics of a Prime Minister, of Netanyahu, making many visits to the United States to meet with Trump and all that, it provides, unfortunately, these ignorant talking points.
Okay. Let me call him up right now. Hey, Bibi, if the optics of this are bad, Bibi, don't come and talk to the President of the United States, Bibi.
Can I say something to David for a second? David, you also made a comment about talk show hosts, that Israel has to worry about what U.S. talk show hosts say. I need to quote Golda Meir, one of my favorite quotes, and she said, "If we have a choice between being dead and pitied and being alive with a bad image, we'd rather be alive and have the bad image." So much for the talk show hosts. It's a sovereign nation trying to stay alive and not be annihilated by the threats coming out of Iran.
Right. Right, and to my point, these talk show hosts, I'm not so much concerned about what they do in terms of impressions of Israel. Israel's going to do what Israel needs to do. A pox on them for ginning up hatred against Jews in the United States.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's my concern about the talk show hosts. Now, you're going to blame that on Bibi? Because if Bibi wasn't attacking in Gaza and in Lebanon, these talk show hosts wouldn't have fodder to turn the populace against the American Jews? Come on. And that's the line of reasoning that's out there. And it's got to be challenged every time that it is made, in my opinion. And that's why I've devoted almost 100% of my writings, if you've noticed on my social media, to this issue, protecting the Jews. Because they're under unbelievable duress in the United States of America and around the world in the diaspora.
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. I don't fault you at all for your campaign. I think it's very timely and necessary, and more journalists need to take to the airwaves and the internet and, to do that. So absolutely, and it's an unfortunate
The threat against the president, I mean, I'm sorry, the threat against the governor of a state.
Yeah, oh, for sure, 100%, Gary.
I bet you 9 out of 10 people
Not
in
just
this
that,
room.
not just that, Gary, a potential presidential campaigner for the
Right.
United States.
Did you know about this threat before I mentioned it?
The second one? No.
Yeah, no. Why? Why is it not getting coverage? When Gretchen Whitmer, when they busted those guys for plotting the kidnapping and killing of Gretchen Whitmer, it became national news, and rightly so. How come this hasn't become national news?
Right. Absolutely.
Come on. Let's call it for what it really is. And I'm not blaming you for the problems of the Jewish people at all, David.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No, I know you're not. I appreciate that. I know you're not. Okay. All right. Well, those are my points. Thank you for letting me speak. And hopefully the others can have time to say what they need to say.
Thank you, David. Let's go to Homer, followed by Philip.
You know, your other speakers have taken a lot of time, so I will be succinct. I think Iran has had every opportunity for peace, and they've provided clarity by continuing to attack the world. And I'll be the only person on this stage to predict their regime will be overthrown, they'll be washed away by history, and no regime will deserve it more. And I'm done speaking.
You just want to trigger Marshall by using the term succinct.
He's the person I got it from, which is why I don't like it.
Oh, come on. Come on. Just because you and he may not
I know.
Philosophically.
It's a really petty thing.
Very petty.
It's as petty as the president.
All right, let's move on from that very succinct discussion between Marshall and me and go to Philip, followed by Amir.
Hi, Gary, thank you very much. I just want to, about this MOU and some of the discussions in the room last night when somebody actually read the wording of the MOU. And when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, I think it said something about making the best effort to keep it open, which of course brings me back to the point that there's a lot of faction in Iran, and there's some people that's heavily opposed to any kind of peace negotiations, and I think it might be difficult to keep the people that actually signed that MOU responsible for what happens in the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, the wording, they best differ. But of course, the United States is quick on the trigger, and like was mentioned, 90 sites was struck by missiles. Also, just of course, it made me think of the fact that with great power comes great responsibility. And of course, it might be argued that some in Iran might see the United States as an existential threat. I mean, it was the United States which plotted and then assassinated the Ayatollah, was it not? And half of his family, which of course violence begets violence. So when the Ayatollah is being buried, I don't know, to me, those people shouting those, horrible things. But I mean, it's what, there's a difference between what you hear and what you actually see. What's actually happening. So I think, people are not like water, just like in the United States, there's many different opinions and factions, and it's the same in Iran. And there's people like Stefan who spoke earlier who was thanking Donald Trump and for the assassination, whereas there's other people that's willing to take up weaponry and try and shut the whole peace process down. So I think it's a really difficult situation. must be some kind of negotiated peace. One should never give up hope on that. I think, religious fundamentalism carries some blame, and education and a proper example, and not always to answer violence with violence. Sometimes, as we can see, it is definitely not the answer. And some of the rhetoric, like the anniversary that Iranian people were made by God to show other people how evil people are. That's not the rhetoric which provides a good outcome in terms of wanting to have peaceful negotiations and people just living peacefully with a little bit. Anyways, that's what I wanted to say, and thanks as always for this room.
Philip, I think that your comments about the cause and effect for the chance deaths to Trump and the threats to assassinate him are void of history. Alan, are you listening?
Yes, sir. I'm listening, and I'm
okay. I'm going
glad.
to say something. I'm going to say something in Farsi, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it. I'm going to say March Bar Carter.
You want to say
Mark Bar Carter? What did I just say in Farsi?
You said death to Carter.
Death to Carter.
Mark Bar Carter. This
Death
feeling.
to Carter.
I hope the rest of the world.
Were they not shouting "Death to Carter" outside the U.S. Embassy during the Iranian?
We're doing it in Arlington, Texas, in the UTA. What are you talking about?
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you very much.
But I hope, let me make one wish. I hope 99.9% of the world, they think like Philip. Because he thinks we are dealing with a bunch of angels. He was pissed off because I said 99% of these people, they don't care about human lives whatsoever. If they did, they wouldn't burn 7,000 of them people in the bazaar of city of Rash, which is on the border of Caspian Sea, Philip. I hope you heard me. And you want to sit down and talk to these people. Negotiation. Yes. Peace talk. You sit down, talk to the peace. It shoot the son front of the father, and they make the father 75 million toman pay to get the body for the bag, and the bullet hit his son and it killed him. You want to sit down on the table and negotiate with these people. Thanks to you. I hope the rest of the world think like you. We will be living in the heaven. Back to you.
And remember, as Alan sometimes mentions, he hasn't mentioned it today, their governmental philosophy, which is a theocratic philosophy, is to spread this around the world, starting with Europe. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. Amir.
Well, I just want to say that I'm here in South Africa. If I would want to share the atrocities that can occur, I mean, it would be shocking to all of you, but I don't, because I want to have hope for a world where we can live in some kind of negotiated peace. So I'll go out with, all we are saying is give peace a chance.
And as I said when I first sang it, that's one of my favorite songs. But you and I, Philip, can negotiate a peace. If we're having an argument, you and I can negotiate a peace. Why? You and I are reasonable people, and we will say, well, it's to the benefit of both of us to resolve this. This regime does not think the way Philip and Gary do. Amir.
Hi guys. Hi Alan. I just wanted to just basically confirm what you just said about charging the bodies. This has not changed one iota from 47 years ago. when they actually shot people and then they charged for the bullet. So this regime is very, very consistent in what Alan has just said. I just wanted to confirm that. My next point is regarding what you said, Gary, regarding the issue that the Jewish people are facing in America. And I don't know if you remember when Ahmadinejad was in power, he actually set up a conference in Tehran, and there were quite a big number of Jewish people that some I remember that were from New York, and they came and attended to the conference, and they were actually against Israel and what Israel was doing at the time in the West Bank by demolishing houses and what have you. So I don't really understand how people can decide which Jew is it? Is it the one that's against Israel, or is it the one that's pro-Israel when they attack them in the US, or when they sort of talk against them being anti-Semite? So that's quite a question for me. What I really wanted to say is what Darrell, I think, talked about, and he talks about the value of Iran to the United States being oil. I'd like to make a point, and this is quite an important point, which is often misunderstood. You know, there is a massive difference between Iran and the two countries that we often talk about, Russia and China, because we put these three countries together very often, and there is a big difference between them. And that is if you like, the cultural divide between the vast majority of the people in Iran and the regime in Iran. Okay? The vast majority of people in Iran, culturally, they lean very much towards the Western values. The freedom, democracy, secularism, liberalism, multi-party stuff, etc., etc. Whereas we know that the regime in Iran is completely the opposite. The slogans and the rhetoric in the past 47 years is a clear testament to that. Now, this is definitely not the case for Russia and Russians and China and the Chinese. There is no such a divide culturally between the people and the government in these two countries, namely Russia and China. So I think that is quite an important factor which should not be ignored. I actually think Iranians, the vast majority of the Iranians, have a great potential to be a kind of a genuine friend of the West, in particular the US. And that's an important consideration. I think that's often missed. So I really wanted to make that point, which is quite important.
Amir, just to correct you, the group that attended the Holocaust Denial Summit in 2006 were from the Natura Karta, which is a very extreme religious sect. It's the same group you see protesting with the pro-Hamas crowd in New York, and it is a fringe small sect, and it was shunned all over the world, including a statement from the chief rabbi of Israel at the time, who urged the global Jewish community to boycott and ban any of those rabbis from any of their temples. And mainstream Jewish groups and organizations from around the world made statements regarding that group that went to Iran. So no, that was not representative of the board of presidents or any large group from the United States or from anywhere in the world. It was a small fringe group in 2006. I just wanted to set the record straight on that.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I didn't actually know that, but my point is, I think it still stands. If someone wants to attack a Jewish person, then how do they know which side they are on? That was the point I was making, but obviously thank you for clarifying.
And I would take it a step further. It doesn't matter which side they're on. A Jewish person in the United States who's 100% in support of the actions of Israel
that some people claim is even genocidal. I'm not obviously claiming that. Has no impact on the decision that was made in Jerusalem to do whatever the IDF did. Zero impact. So why are you killing them? I'm attacking them. And sometimes killing. Doesn't matter whether they are in agreement or disagreement with the state of Israel. What matters is, remember, before there was a state of Israel, there have been centuries of persecutions of the Jews. The Holocaust, from which Israel was born, to find a safe haven for the Jews who were not safe in their own countries of birth in Europe, occurred before the modern state of Israel. So what was the excuse then? It's all bullshit. And I'm going to call bullshit when I see the bullshit. Michaela, you get the lamp.
I was just going to ask Amir, I just came in late, so I didn't, but he was saying how the people of Iran, have so much to offer, and I agree. How were they overtaken by, how was the regime, how did the regime take over these people?
Well, I think the way it happened, obviously the revolution was for the right reasons, if you like. It was the majority of the people. I mean, a lot of people call it, don't like to call it a revolution, but it had all the hallmarks of every type of revolution from the social science point of view. Now, what happened was then all the different groups from the right to the left to the nationalists, they all revolted against what they thought as a despotic regime of the Shah at the time. Now, but then gradually, the people who had the most sophisticated organization within the religious circles managed to basically get rid of all the other groups gradually. And once they got that to that point, then they started enforcing their power through the bullet, basically. And they managed to kill thousands of people at the time to get rid of any kind of, dissent against their despotic rule. And that has developed over the past 47 years to the point that now they can kill tens of thousands of people. They can machine gun them and still get away with it. I mean, it's amazing that the world community doesn't call it a genocide when something like that happens. And yet in Gaza, for example, they can call it a genocide. So, I mean, it just mind boggles, basically.
Amir, do you have any hope for Reza Pahlavi to have some influence or to help his people? Or do you have any hope for that?
It certainly has a quite a lot of following, both in Iran. I mean, I'm personally a Republican, but I'm more than happy for Reza Pahlavi to lead the opposition in terms of what is offered. In fact, to be honest with you, when he talks, he almost comes across as a Republican himself, because he doesn't necessarily believe in royalty. I mean, in a royal household.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. He seems to have, people have backed off. Like they've given up on him, or they've given up on the people. It's there was a lot of hope at first for another uprising.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is that is a classic problem of too many chiefs and not enough Indians. There are a lot of groups which are I mean, in terms of the Republicans within the Iranian diaspora, there are about 20 or 30, and each one of them have got their own little sort of groups. And the sort of solidarity that was expected to be created around Reza Pahlavi, unfortunately, didn't happen. Because sorry.
Yeah, I thought that there would be infighting within Iran, but there's infighting in the diaspora. Well, that's what happened.
That's exactly what happened, yes.
Yeah. That's too bad. Very bad.
So Pahlavi, by the way, has said publicly that what he aspires is to lead a temporary interim government and then let the people of Iran decide what form of government they want. And then once they decide what form of government they want, he wants them to have free and open elections, and then he would step down. He has no desire, as Amir says, at least publicly, of maintaining some royal ascension as had been the case before. Right, Amir?
The problem, Gary, was that Donald Trump decided that he would choose someone from inside Iran to have a deal with, I think, and he basically dropped Reza Pahlavi, and that was a mistake.
He said that, but that doesn't mean Iranian give up on it. See, the reason, Gary, he said that, it is because the propaganda machine outside Iran, they are financially well up to the above them head. They don't hesitate to spend millions of dollars just for being these to do this. They use this thing outside of Iran. They says, look at the Afghanistan, look at the Iraq. If America attack us, the Taliban, they're gonna destroy you. This is the scare tactic they using, this regime using Iran. The same thing is outside. So Reza Pahlavi is a lot smarter than this. And he says, that's what he says from the beginning. He says, I am just the source can pass your word in the 7 languages I know to the rest of the world. I can sit down with the delegate, I can sit down with the government, I can bring your voice to them and tell them, this is all I'm trying to do at this moment. When we go, and then he set up the temporary plan for changing the regime, there won't be any vacuum involved. And then he says after that it's up to the people. You go to the polls and freely vote for whatever you want. If they decide as a kid, I'll be glad to do it. If they want me just to go sit at the corner of the street in Tehran, and if they have a Lalazar and sell ice cream, I will go do that. That's what he said. I don't know how clear he can be, but the propaganda machine grab a word and switch it to the different. A lot of people really unfortunate. I think some of them reached Donald Trump's ears. A lot of time, unfortunately, Monday through Friday, from 5 p.m. New York time, so to 5 p.m. New York time on Monday. And that's the show. Thank you for everybody be safe, be well, have a great weekend, and peace out.